Attractive woman with a gun, black nails, tattoos. A very dangerous combination. Gokurakugai is a pretty interesting manga. It follows a story of two troubleshooters known as Tao and Alma. And what troubleshooters are within this world are people that fix your problems. Basically hitmen for hire, but more so for good. They're a little bit more compassionate, more understanding, but they'll still do jobs that no one else really wants to do. The gritty, the dangerous, etc. This is how they make their living, at least on the surface. See, this world is littered with a bunch of charismatic individuals. On one hand, you have people known as the Beastmen. Basically, these are human and animal hybrids. Quite literally, just think of a sentient animal of some kind. These are normalized in society, but somewhat looked down upon, even segregated a little bit because of what they actually are. But then there's also these things called calamities or Manga. These things are monsters that eat humans, prey on the weak, yet they are created by the bodies of humans and animals combined. They're this abomination creature-like thing that is very different to what is operating within this society. So it has this pinch of fantasy element to it. Tao and Alma, our troubleshooters, help the everyday people within this city, yet underneath their purpose is a little bit different. See, these calamities are actually a really big problem. So their ulterior motive is investigating and hunting down these calamities as best as possible. And they do this by gaining as much information during the day, helping clients with assignments, etc., etc. And they take this knowledge and bridge it to calamities using the money that they obtain, weapons, skills, and overall just general information or tips that may become viable. Hunting down these calamities is Tao and Alma's mission, and they'll do anything to get it done, considering how dangerous and malicious these monsters are and how they prey on humans and the weak. Somewhat interesting. What else is there? There has to be more, right? Has to be something new and invigorating. So what you've just heard is a brief example of what the story is. It's kind of difficult to describe because there's not much of a story as of yet. It only has 2 chapters and a one-shot. So far, what I've read, I've somewhat enjoyed it. Of course, straight away, as you can see, the artistry is brilliant. It's super crisp, it's highly rendered and detailed, the character designs are super lovable and interesting, and that goes for basically every character introduced. There's just an alluring art style to it, from top to bottom, left to right, inside and out. I love it. The story, however, doesn't really share the same quality, which is okay because it's the first 2 chapters, so it has time to build up. There is some sort of promise here, but currently it's very watered down and somewhat generalized. You've probably read bits and pieces of elements within this manga elsewhere 100 different times, but you might see stuff that you find rather interesting, like the society or how the characters interact with one another, or just the normalcy of beastmen and calamities, etc. The idea of hitmen and mafia troubleshooters is always very interesting, but having a nice dynamic between our 2 main characters is even better. So this is Tao. She is a very quiet, cold-faced, ruthless individual that never shows any emotion whatsoever. And she walks around with this sense of pride and ego and this demeanor about herself, which is very alluring but also scary. And this would be Alma, who is the complete opposite. Very outgoing, very energetic, bright and bubbly, fully just to bring this sense of life to the story, to a character that is very emotionless and has this killer intent behind her. Personally, I like this combination of characters. Super obnoxious one way, super obnoxious in the other. They share a lot of similarities within their qualities, however, with how kind-hearted they are. Tao may not show it, but she's very understanding. She comes from a similar struggle and can comprehend it entirely to the point where she is willing to bypass the business procedure or aspects of the job that they are actually doing. Monetary value, if you will. Alma, on the other hand, is too super understanding, but also really supportive and upbeat and very much cheerful about the situation. So it could be very dire and very drastic, but with these 2 characters, you're getting a pretty well-rounded picture of uplifting another person to make them feel a little bit more comfortable. They don't have to do it or try to make it manipulative, but they do it because they can and they understand the struggle. There's a lot of focus on these 2, and I think that's very important for this story to have because they are the focus. Their dynamic, their relationship, how they grow and expand over time, and how they come to understand one another within the hardships of the things that they come across, the calamities, different gangs and organizations, and just ruthless people they encounter. So within 2 chapters, there's a nice amount of work being done there. There always can be more, but so far it's definitely enjoyable. The overall narrative is where it gets a little bit lost. So you have an interesting characters, you have a beautiful aesthetic, but you don't get much of the world. You don't get much of the overall plot, at least as of yet. The only thing that stitches the chapters together and the organization that they actually are is that it's 2 different things. So troubleshooters are hitmen by day, but obviously on the underside, they are people hunting for calamities. The author does a bit more to flare this out, introduce to other characters, open up the organization just a little bit, and this is what I assume is going to be the biggest cohesive tie that makes these bigger, brighter, longer lasting arcs. When you mix that with the assignments within the daytime, basically, the gang violence, missing people, acquiring money, etc., real trivial stuff, right, in comparison, I think you have a pretty good balance of entertainment and quality. One's more deathly demonic, action orientated, and then the other is more gang violence and manipulative and mystery even. Obviously you can apply it to either side, but deciphering it and giving new experiences and different aspects is always a great way to go about it. Currently the author has that opportunity to expand in both avenues, they just haven't started yet. And for a monthly story, finding that balance early on I think is very vital for a story's success. It has everything going for it, it just needs the narrative prowess to really hook people in and want them to continue reading within the following months. Waiting 30 odd days is a long time for a chapter, but the amount of content you get makes up for it. So you gotta make sure that the content you do give is brilliant through and through, is engaging and energetic and filled with different things to look at and appreciate, and a story that is ever unfolding. They have a lot of those boxes ticked and some left blank at the moment. What doesn't help the story currently is kind of more of the normalized or pretty general things that are being used to propel it forward. See, I really love the one-shot for this story because I found it short, sweet, and simple. A nice story through and through. It was a little bit fast-paced, but overall, it definitely piqued my interest, and enough so for a lot of people that this is what actually got it serialized. However, there's things within the full story that obviously weren't within the one-shot, so a lot of things have been changed and moved around, and what they have added is pretty much some of the more relevant or popular topics or genres, tropes, etc. that are currently available in other manga. I don't mind the calamity stuff, even though you could probably get some sort of variation of this anywhere at the moment. The one that definitely was odd, however, is the inspiration to Denji from Chainsaw Man. Alma, our bright, vibrant boy, is half human and half calamity. So he can transform or change and use a couple of pretty interesting abilities, but one spawns directly out of his chest, identical to Denji. I think it's just paying homage to it. I don't think it's disrespectful at all. I actually like the design, I like the approach to it, but the, I guess, overall idea of the transformation and using a different ability, this, that, felt pretty standard. For me personally, it took the value away from the uniqueness of the characters and their personalities by adding this extra level of a transformation or a devilish ability, if that makes sense. This isn't the biggest concern because there's a lot of ways that you can play into it. It does add more layers of exploration in other avenues, as well as the added benefit of the calamities and everything surrounding them. It's just taking what seemed like a more grounded but fantasy-driven story in some aspects, with the beastmen and mermaids and stuff like that, but seemed very normalized within its one-shot to where it is now, but more watered down, and instead branched off into demons, devils, superpowers, etc. Again, it's not the worst thing. It's going to be different for a lot of you. You may love this stuff that they bring in here because you're so used to it, or maybe you just don't read much of it. I don't think there's anything within this story that is inherently straight out bad or that I absolutely disliked. I had a fun time reading it. I enjoyed the amount of content within it. I'm just hoping that over time it starts to stitch its story together a little bit more cohesively, having the chapters blur into each other or building some sort of bigger arcing narrative that links everything together. It's very early to say all this because it only has 2 chapters, but for monthly stories, this is a crucial time. Reading retention for people is at an all-time low. Not many are going to come back unless there is that hook or something there that's going to snap onto their interest. Artistically, 100% all the way, that's fully there. Story-wise, a little bit more to be desired, but definitely has promise to grow and bloom into something rather enjoyable given the right steps taken towards it. I I am excited to see this story grow, to learn and evolve and morph into something potentially very beautiful. It has all the tools and the foundation for it. It's just chiseling away until you find that perfection, till you find that middle ground that feels right, not only within yourself as an author and an artist, but also for the reader. I'd be very interested to hear all your thoughts on this. If you've read the one-shot, or if you're reading the first 2 chapters from the brand new serialization for it. Let me know your thoughts. Already done. Sick of dreaming about this. Alright, I'm going fully to bed now. That's it. Need to sleep for 20 odd hours straight.